Greetings, YouTube. I apologize if my voice is a little rough at the moment. At the time of filming, I am in the midst of a cold. I frequently talk about movies here. I also discuss role-playing games. And sometimes in the course of discussing these things, I will describe how my immersion is broken if an author or a filmmaker or a scriptwriter asks me to take the concept of willing suspension of disbelief too far. Now, if you throw things like the movie Wizards at me, there isn't really anything to be concerned about. It's a wacky world fusing post-apocalyptic sword and sorcery and the kitchen sink at you. So internal consistency doesn't exist, and there is no bearing whatsoever on the real world. So you will not hear things like that. I may critique other aspects of it, and that's okay. But my willing suspension of disbelief doesn't really play a part in that film. Whereas if you do a tight, realistic crime drama, say like Goodfellas, and suddenly people started flying around in the room, that would sever my willing suspension of disbelief, because you have now completely taken me out of the scene and the setting that was created by the filmmaker at the beginning of the movie. Now, if they played with that, they say, okay, now there's a reason for this, and it becomes part of the game, then you could save that. But if they just did it inexplicably, with nothing else, it's going to ruin it for me. And my gauge of this is finely tuned. Some people have suggested too finely tuned, that my tolerance of this type of thing is too low. But when I hear this kind of thing and people tell me that, well, it's just a movie and in this universe X, Y, and Z happens, it doesn't matter if it's not our real world. Within this film, this is what happens. Then I'm thinking, well, it's no longer based in the real world, because even though it started out based in the real world, if you're now telling me it's not in midstream, if you're asking me to switch horses while we're en route, that ruins the process for me. That ruins my engagement, my immersion, and my enjoyment. And essentially people are telling me that every single movie is over-the-top, high fantasy, like the Wizards. And I have a difficult time identifying with that and becoming immersed in it because it is so utterly unstructured. When I see something from the real world not function like the real world, there better be a really good reason. For example, when disease in films doesn't behave like the way disease behaves in the real world, there better be a really good reason. And it better be as internally consistent as possible, and it better be explicitly explained and handed to the viewer in a manner that we can understand it. It becomes comprehensible. But most of the time, I'm using disease as an example, it just shows that the writers of the script and the director have no idea how diseases work in the real world. They don't care. And they just want your audience just to go with it. And to me, that is poor craftsmanship. And if people let them slide with it, it means that the next filmmaker, or that same filmmaker, will do the same thing, and it will very well get worse. The craftsmanship is getting poorer and poorer, because we're not calling them to task. We're not saying, no, that's not how that works out here. It needs to look like the real world, because these are real things. Disease is a real thing. And if you have something going on in your film that is nigh on the concept of magic, then stop telling me it's the real world. Tell me from the get-go, it's magic. And I can still call you to task if you're not internally consistent without reason. But filmmakers don't do that. They do sloppy craftsmanship, and audiences let them get away with it, and they just hand wave it away. And we're just supposed to sit back and go, oh yeah, I know someone that really enjoyed the movie After Earth because he looked at the film that deep. And if you look at the film that deep, it's just pretty pictures on the screen. I can't do that. I would have to be really high on painkillers to let that happen. I want more depth. I want more connectivity to the real world. Whether it's a role-playing game or it's a movie. I don't read fiction any longer, so it doesn't really count. But for example, I give a lot more slack to a Marvel comic book than I do to a crime drama. Because a Marvel comic book is set in a soap opera with superpowers. So I cut a lot of slack there. But I still would like internal consistency. If a superhero's powers are A, B, and C, I expect them to remain A, B, and C unless you have a really good reason that they're no longer A, B, and C. And if they're now B, C, and D, okay, why are they B, C, and D? And it should be internally consistent. It should make some logical sense. But if it doesn't make any logical sense, if it's just because that's what the author needed at the moment, then you're breaking my immersion. For example, in one of the superhero films with Chris Reeves, Superman I should say, he had constructovision. He just like looked at the a broken section of the wall of China and it just rebuilt itself. No explanation why. A power never attributed to Superman in the past. It was just convenient for that moment. Even though he could have done it manually and in as much time if he wanted to and stayed within the concept of the character. That made even a film with a godling like Superman seem absurd. It took me out of the moment. And I can't turn that off. At least not when I'm conscious and not high on something. And people say that I ruin movies because of it, that I can't enjoy movies because of it. And that's not true. There are many films I can enjoy because they don't do that. They do it to a very small extent. And I appreciate the craftsmanship shown by filmmakers and script writers and game producers when they put the effort in and they do it right. I appreciate that. I respect it. And when people don't, to me, it means that they don't respect their audience. They are saying that the audience is not worth the effort to make a well-crafted game or a well-crafted film. Just who cares? Let's make a buck. Move on. And because we tolerate this, we end up with an endless stream of crappy movies and poorly written games. And they're just going to keep doing that over and over again. And yet people will then complain about the state of filmmaking or games or something like that. Because they tolerate it. And they shouldn't. So I'm asking my audience, what is the level you are happy with for your willing suspension of disbelief? Do you want real world things behave like the real world? Or are you okay if dogs climb trees like monkeys? And elephants can float? And seals can talk in a world where there are no sapient talking animals? Are you okay with all these things? Or do you want something that's grounded in reality unless there's a darn good reason it isn't? I want to know. And I want to hear about your opinion about my scale. Is my scale too sensitive? Do you feel I'm being too intolerant of these genres? That I'm judging them too harshly? I'm not saying I'm going to instantaneously sway my reasoning, but I may change my thinking. I've done it in the past, and I plan on doing it in the future. But I've got to tell you, I've been sticking to my current calibration of willing suspension to disbelief for a really long time, and I think it's served me well. So it's going to take quite a bit of talking to convince me otherwise. So let's hear it, folks. Where does your willing suspension of disbelief fall? And where do you think mine does?